Hello and welcome to Newsroom. We're live from Islamabad and I'm Sharmeen Ali. A lot of developments going on between the US and China. Increasing tensions have also caused a toll on stock markets as well. This is while Mike Pompeo, US Secretary of State, has said that evidence shows that coronavirus originated in a lab in China. And this is amidst all the blame game about where the coronavirus virus actually started from, and the Chinese having refuted this. There was also recently tension in the South China Sea. We're going to be talking about that with our expert on our program today. Also, again, in a fresh round of fighting in Indian-occupied Kashmir, 5 security men, including 2 officers, 1 colonel and a major, were killed in the occupied Kashmir Valley, along with 4 Kashmiri freedom fighters. And this is after increased heavy-handedness by the Indian military and security forces in Indian-occupied Kashmir. There have been many deaths over there in that region. We'll be talking about that, as well as the ceasefire violations that have taken place across from the Indian side to the Pakistani side across the line of control. Also, the advisor for planning, Asad Umar, has said that the lockdown may actually make 18 million people jobless in Pakistan, and he spoke about how the lockdown versus fighting the pandemic has to be balanced due to the fact that yes, lives have to be saved, but at the same time it's not possible to completely eradicate the virus, and it is important to flatten the curve while at the same time not causing extreme devastation to people's livelihoods as well. So we'll be talking about that on our program as well. So to begin our program for today, we'll be talking now to Shiraz Mohammed, who is online with us, and we'll be speaking about the US and China tensions. Shiraz, thank you for joining us again online.
Thank you for having me.
So now we're seeing these most recent claims by Mike Pompeo, US Secretary of State, and President Trump has also said that he was pretty confident that this virus had started in Wuhan back in December. And recently he said that there's evidence that the Wuhan Institute of Virology was the source. Your comments on this, please.
Well, this is then again politics at play. There are certain things which can be discussed, obviously. But as far as the origins of the virus itself is concerned, multiple organizations, including WHO, has said that there is no connection between the lab or in any way engineered by human beings, this as far as this virus is concerned. On the other end, we see the internal politics, which is then again piling up pressure on the Trump administration, the way they have handled the situation. Because if we talk about numbers, there are like more than 1 million people affected by this virus in the United States of America and 66,000 deaths. So this is something which is unprecedented. It has never been seen, and there is no, you can say, answer as far as the administration is concerned when it is being, asked by the citizens of United States of America. So Mike Pompeo, his statements have been very vague earlier on as well on many issues. So I don't know how effective it is going to be to take his statement, because earlier on the intelligence agencies, U.S. intelligence agencies denied this fact. He was confused even while making this allegation on China and the specific lab in question. And he was also agreeing at the same time with the fact that there is no connection as such, as agreed by his forces chief and otherwise other scientists as well. So there is a lot of confusion, and there are a lot of power politics at play as well, internal plus external. So this is something, a new world we have to face. We have to see how does it affect the international relations, how it will impact the politics, the global politics as itself, because UK is also asking similar kind of questions. It is important to note over here that yes, there are issues when it comes to, there are questions when it comes to what happened in China. But this approach of blaming for the sake of blame, that is not going to win, because we are in this collectively. Yes, we have to find the origins and address those issues, but at the same time, we have to avoid this blame game which is taking place or politics. Humanity definitely needs to come first, and that is what is at threat at the moment. If we talk about China, yeah, we have to see the fact that China probably was not, you can say, quick in response or sharing the information globally. But as far as the origin of the virus is concerned, it seems as if it was naturally, it has its origins in nature. It jumped from an animal to human being. It wasn't designed so far. That's what the science and the scientists are saying. It wasn't uh, designed by human beings as such. Rather, it was a naturally transferred from an animal to a human being. But as far as the information flow of what happened in China, and was it communicated to the world within an appropriate time? The response then again was response time was enough according to what happened in China. So these kind of questions may come up, and these questions may need to be answered in the upcoming days. But otherwise, yes, there are, as far as US and China is concerned, the trade wars recently, they got settled, and now we see another aggressive posture from United States of America. The blame game is then again it's on from both ends. On the one end, US says it's the lab, and on the other end, Chinese says it's the US military. So we have to see in the upcoming days how these things shape up, or how the end of coronavirus will affect the international politics in a temporary manner or in permanent manner.
Right. Even the director of national intelligence in the US says that the origin of this virus is still not determined. I don't think there's anybody who can say with absolute surety where it came from. There's been a lot of
Yes.
blame game, like you said, and a lot of conspiracy theories going around. And initially, it was previously thought that it was from a market in Wuhan where they were selling exotic animals.
Yes, that's what I'm trying to say earlier on, because nobody is sure about the origin. We are not even sure how COVID-19 is behaving itself. What can be the possible symptoms, or what can be the possible, you can say, preventions in that context. So it's too early to say anything, and that's why I say it's too early to blame any country. This is something where we have to be more practical, and where we have to be more collective in our response. So at the moment, the kind of politics which we are seeing, the kind of blame game going on from United States of America vis-a-vis pointing finger towards what happened in China, or it is some internally intentional initiative taken by the state, by the Chinese state. So that is then again, it is not possible. The evidence so far is contradicting this claim. On the other hand, definitely, as I mentioned earlier, there can be certain loopholes which can in the near future be answered. But at this point and this time, I don't think so there is any concrete evidence that it was done deliberately. And then again, we have to see that China is also trying to support the international response towards this virus.
Right, and when and if it is determined, excuse me, when and if it is determined that this virus originated from a particular country, is there legal recourse that other countries can take, and to claim back, say, the economic losses and the losses of lives that have taken place?
Well, then again, if it is certain that it was, then it's an act of it can be termed as an act of war by different countries, but at the same time, it will be a globally, it will end up globally isolating that particular country. So this is then again, it's too big a claim to support. Yes, the responses which we can expect from the international community, or for that matter, big stakeholders such as United States of America, UK, and Europe, is more will be in the form of sanctions, probably in the form of certain, you can say, inquiries and certain questions, because we have to see that this nature of the pandemic, the nature of the crisis itself can affect the international politics. But I don't think any global change. Since you mentioned about the conspiracies and the conspiracy theories, There is another conspiracy theory which says that it will push humans more towards surveillance. You know, there will be more surveillance as far as
Right.
the human activity is concerned. So this is then again a global pandemic, and there will be a global response. I don't see anything out of the box taking place. States
Right.
will
Thank you.
eventually
Thank you so
solve
much
their
for your
solution.
input, Mohammed Shiraz. He's an international affairs expert. Now, to come to our next topic, which we're seeing a lot and very frequently recently, that the killing of Kashmiri people in Indian occupied Kashmir in the most recent gun battle, we've seen that 5 security personnel from the Indian side, including a colonel and a major in the army over there, as well as 4 suspected freedom fighters were killed in a gunfight in occupied Kashmir. And since the August 5th lockdown, there's been flashes of violence and tensions all over the valley, and many people have been killed in the last couple of months, particularly during the lockdown. 54 fighters have been killed in occupied Kashmir this year, and 30 since the March lockdown. So to discuss this topic, we've got with us online Lieutenant General Reza Mohammad Khan, who's the former president of NDU. Thank you, sir, for joining us.
Thank you.
Sir, I'd like to ask you this, that what we're just talking about, that there's been regular violence since the August 5th lockdown in Indian occupied Kashmir. They've been under lockdown much longer than the rest of the world due to the pandemic, and that was a different type of a lockdown that was due to heavy-handedness and oppression by the Indian military. And in the midst of all that, there was all this violence, and now we've seen that 4 suspected freedom fighters have been killed, as well as Indian soldiers as well.
Yes, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think as we talk today, I think tomorrow India and Indian-held Kashmir would be actually under a curfew for the last 9 months, starting from 5th August. And this is actually the longest curfew in the history of the world. And of course, after the spread of COVID-19, there is a double kind of a dilemma in Indian-held Kashmir, where the people cannot move even for their very essential sort of access to food, to health, and to rations. We also are aware that since 5 August, because of the number of measures which the Indian government have taken illegally, and the most recent amongst them is the change in the domicile law on 1st April, and of course other sort of measures, a totally new generations of young Kashmiris, angry Kashmiris, have now gathered, and they are prepared to rise against Indian barbarism in Indian-held Kashmir. It has united all Kashmiris across the political divide, and they are prepared to go to any extent to fight for their right of self-determination. So this is the situation as of today. And of course, you have also seen very recently that the United Nations State Department and other agencies responsible for monitoring religious freedom has identified India as a country of particular concern because of religious bigotry there, and particularly because of the ill treatment of Indian Muslims and the Muslims of Kashmir.
Right,
so whatever is
General,
happening in India,
right.
Indian
Sir, at this point, I also want to invite Mishal Malik, who is the chairperson of the Peace and Culture Organization. Mishal, thank you for joining us online.
Thank you. Welcome.
Mishal, we were just hearing about from General Reza Mohammad Khan, who's still online with us. What I wanted to ask you was, as a wife of a freedom fighter, Mr. Yasin Malik, who's currently incarcerated, what would you say about the recent so-called gunfights against the suspected freedom fighters? They say that policemen entered a house saying they want to evacuate civilians, and they're not sure why they entered that house. Again, there have been 54 fighters who've been killed in the occupied the valley this year, and 30 since the lockdown. What do you have to say about these people and these freedom fighters and the way they're being killed?
It's a tragedy that every Kashmiri is a freedom fighter. Mostly majority, they're 99.9% are unarmed. And all these fake raids and encounters that have been going on for numerous decades. We have countless series of massacres in the past as well. So this is a repetition of the same policy, but a policy of terror, definitely, against the defenseless nation. But especially during the past, if you go through the month of April, the amount of killings is like just in the month of April, it's 33. And 152 people, according to the statistics, 152 people are critically injured, and hundreds of people have been arrested during last month, which is alarming because all over the world, especially the Corona situation, the UN chief and many world bodies have been urging all countries around the world that, please depopulate areas which are congested, especially prisons, and release prisoners that are not well, that are not a big risk, and depopulate. But unfortunately, they have taken full advantage of this Corona thing, and because the world's focus is on countering that. So instead of following the global norms, India is hell-bent upon unleashing genocide against the Kashmiris with the guise of coronavirus. So it's a very scary situation because, especially after 5th August, post Article 370 abrogation, all the rights of the Kashmiri people have been suspended through a presidential order. And then now, during this Corona lockdown, new federal laws are being implemented from the center, Delhi, which is definitely a black law, new citizenship laws, and they are granting citizenship to Hindus, lakhs and lakhs of Hindus in Jammu and Kashmir, which is again a gross violation of international norms and treaties.
Right. Mashal, please stay with us. General Reza, I'd like to come back to you and ask you that you were mentioning earlier that U.S. Center for International Religious Freedom had a hearing about this. They put in India on the list of countries of interest for their violation of religious minorities' rights. Also, we saw a congressional hearing last year about Kashmir and the heavy-handedness there, human rights violations there. So, sir, in your opinion, with all these developments and the fact that the situation for minorities in India has gotten worse, it's coming more and more into the forefront in front of the world. Do you see any sort of in future, maybe because US CERF made a recommendation that the organizations or individuals that are responsible for this may be blacklisted, they may have their assets seized or not get visas. Do you see any action such as that taken against their draconian laws like the Army Act and Public Safety Act as well?
I think the U.S. State Department should very seriously be concerned about this report, and they should blacklist the Indian political leadership as well as military leadership, which are responsible for the current situation there. We are also aware that the government of UAE, the government of Qatar, the government of Iran, the OIC, they have also expressed very serious concerns on Islamophobia and whatever is being meted out to the Kashmiris. So not only by the international community, but particularly I would say that the Middle Eastern countries should now put pressures, and I'm talking of economic pressures, on India to prevent them from ill-treating all their minorities, particularly the Indian Muslims and the Kashmiris. Also, we are aware, that the Indians have falsely implicated that Pakistan is attempting infiltration. Now, this is totally absurd and baseless because of a number of reasons. And the first reason is that there is massive deployment along the line of control and the working boundary in Kashmir. More than 600,000 Indian soldiers are there. This is the most dense concentration of troops anywhere in the world. There are multiple layers of obstacles, barricades, fences, watchtowers, minefields, and all this is covered by artillery fire, and this is being watched by Indian and Israeli drones and also satellites. So it is impossible for anyone infiltrate from the Pakistani side into the Indian side. And as the Foreign Office very rightly said, I think probably they may be creating either another rationale for some false flag operations inside the Indian held Kashmir, and also they are trying to divert attention of the world from their barbaric actions against innocent people, and also from this recent report of the United States, which has designated India as a country of particular concern.
Right. Sir, please stay with us online. Mashal, now I'd like to ask you this. The Kashmiri people right now, I mean, and we're seeing the situation of Muslims all over India, and we've seen it really bad for over 70 years in Indian-occupied Kashmir. It seems to, every time we say there's a boiling point, it seems to get worse and worse. What do you think that the Kashmiri youth, the way they're being pushed against a wall, are they being sort of pushed into a situation where they're forced into militancy as they're not able to have a normal life and they see so much oppression around them and such cruel behavior towards their own people and their families, etc.?
Yeah, that's very true, because the level of patience is also evaporating, and there's a level of tolerance also and towards civility, and because all forms of communication and normalcy or any kind of basic fundamental rights, if you see the journalists also, how they're being slapped with draconian laws like Gaur Gilani, Musarraf and others. So this is like, something which is, there's absolutely no political freedom. Even right now, during the pandemic situation, I mean, India is intensifying its crackdown, and it's just, people going out to buy food and medicines are being jailed. I mean, journalists are being charged, beating doctors, paramedics, the municipal workers. So it's like India is really, really tightening its grip on Kashmir, and it's really going to explode, this volcano. I mean, seizing on pandemic measures to prevent a surge of resistance. This is to set their rule and to do whatever they want to. And for them, I think the only definition for India for peace is a graveyard of Kashmiris. But Kashmiris are going to resist. I mean, this is a failed attempt. Whatever they do, in the end, they can never win the sentiment. So, but if their plan is of a genocide, then I can't say much, because how can we compete, a defenseless nation, against the highest occupation of the world? So the world must take its responsibility and look what India is doing right now. And and at this moment in time, I think I would request the UN Secretary General to seriously appoint a UN special representative on the human rights situation in Indian-occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and send a fact-finding mission at least to that territory, and to exert pressure on India to assess the situation on ground. And there are no medicines for the people. There are no what do you call those, kits to test if people have corona or not available within Kashmir. They're being sent to other states of India.
Right. Thank you, Mashal, for joining us online. Very brave lady indeed. Sir, General Reza, now I'd like to ask your final thoughts about the fact that in Indian-occupied Kashmir, some people have said that the steps that the Modi government might take there, for example, giving economic incentives for the people living there, for the Muslims living there, might actually win them over. How likely do you think that would be? And considering right now there are also plans that in Indian-occupied Kashmir, there are also plans to make sort of settlements like in the state of Israel. Which way do you think this is going to go for the people in Kashmir?
I think this is going to go in the wrong direction, because the political leadership is actually working on the theory of divide and rule for winning political gains, and this has been pointed out by the Indian opposition as well. They are not sincere in giving the benefits of any economic incentives, in particular to the minorities and in particular to Muslims or the Kashmiri Muslims. Businesses of the Kashmiris, they, because of the curfew and now the lockdown, they were already destroyed, and it is very difficult to perceive that there is any chance of their recovery. So therein would come the United Nations and the Middle Eastern countries and all the affluent countries of the world, to come internationally to their rescue. We are aware that, to the Kashmir conflict itself, there are principally there are four parties. It is not India and Pakistan, but also China, the Kashmiris of Indian-held Kashmir, and also the Kashmiri diaspora, which is spread all over the world. And it is they alone who has actually, they must, even within the current situation, keep this issue alive, and wherever they are, particularly in the G8 countries, they should go to their governments and highlight this very serious issue. Also, I'd like to strongly recommend that, a fresh United Nations Security Council resolution needs to come in, wherein special sort of incentives must be given to the people of Indian-held Kashmir. And even if it has to be an kind of video conferencing, it should be done. And I think both China and Pakistan, the OIC and Muslim countries could work together for this, so that maximum pressure is put on India to prevent them from doing what they are doing against the Indian Muslims and the Muslims in the occupied Kashmir. At the same time, I think we should recall the United Nations General Secretary's appeal to the whole world that this situation arising out of COVID-19 must not be misused for human rights violations. And I think, although he did not name India, but I think that was at the top of his list, wherein all the opposition to the controversial legislation passed in India about the citizenship there, and also in the Indian-held Kashmir, the COVID-19 lockdown was misused, to quell those kinds of dissenting voices. You have also heard that very recently female journalists in Indian-held Kashmir were harassed there, and the cyber security laws were being used against them for telling the truth. So all these things, I think, should be highlighted through the United Nations, through the Security Councils, through our own media, and the Indian policy on Kashmir in particular, which is based on hatred of the minorities. This again needs to be highlighted, particularly under the present environment.
Right, sir, and also what we saw after August 5th, after the revocation of Article 370 and 35A, that previously there were already many freedom leaders who were part of the freedom movement who were imprisoned, but then after that lockdown, even the people, the leaders who were working previously with the Indian governments, like the Abdullahs and the Muftis and all, they were also put under incarceration. They were incarcerated as well. And also anybody with means at that time was put into prison or into house arrest. So are there any leaders left out of the Kashmiri people who are actually willing to work with the Indian government again, or is this a completely deadlocked situation?
I think whatever actions the Indians have taken on 5th August and thereafter, it has actually united all Kashmiris across the political divide, as I said earlier, and this is actually what they are. It has backfired. All their policies in Kashmir have backfired on them, and now they do not know really what to do. India has actually now become a rogue state in every sense of the word, because it has resorted to total unilateralism, disrespect for international treaties and obligations. In fact, this is the definition of a rogue state. When any nation disrespects international treaties and obligations, and I am in particularly now referring to the number of United Nations Security Council resolutions on Kashmir, then it becomes a rogue state. It has also become an apartheid state in the true sense of the word, because of the treatment which they are meting out to their minorities, and particularly Muslims. You have heard that the Hindus in India, they have actually passed some kind of informal instructions that they would not purchase vegetables and other eatables from the Muslims. So the Indian Muslims are actually left very high and dry, and this again proves the theory of divide and rule inside India. And I think this should be an issue, a matter of grave concern. The OIC and I think other human rights organizations like Human Rights Watch.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us online, Lieutenant General Reza Mohammed Khan. And now going on to our final topic today, that Asad Omar, the advisor to the Prime Minister on planning, has said that this lockdown due to the coronavirus pandemic may actually leave 18 million people jobless, and the devastating effect that this is going to have on the people, on their livelihoods, on the economy, and having to weigh that with saving lives and the impact on the healthcare system is in fact a very, very huge task. So we'll be talking about that right now with Muzammil Aslam, who is an economist. Thank you, Muzammil Saab, for joining us.
You're welcome.
Asad Omar said that the lockdown may actually make 18 million people lose their jobs. We've seen that now over the last month and a half, shops, everything, and businesses are closed. Only partially certain low-risk businesses have opened, like eating places for takeaway and pharmacies, etc. And then the Prime Minister also said he'll open up construction and boost that industry, agriculture, a couple of different sectors. But this impact, sir, 18 million job losses, how damaging is that going to be for the Pakistani people?
I think it's very damaging as far as Pakistan economy is concerned. Over 80% of the economy is led by private sector, and 20% is by government. And this 80% of the private sector economy is literally at halt, and everybody is locked down at the moment. And the other thing is the majority of the country jobs has been created by private sector. So if the private sector is shut down, literally, first of all, the blue collar people and the people who are on the daily wages, their employment are at major risk. And no wonder, Assad is giving 18 million people, going to be unemployed. I think there will be more than 18 million people will be unemployed. Because if you see, our labor force is more than 70 million people. And overall, the services sector is about 53% of the economy. So I would suspect, the unemployment ratio would be in between 20 to 25 million people at the moment.
Right. And according to the Pakistan Institute of Development Economics, between 20 and 70 million people might fall below the poverty line. How will we handle this?
Because, the thing is, every household, if one person employs, it at least feeds 3 to 4 people at home. So, if it is going to be 20 million people unemployed, there will be definitely, 60 to 70 million people will suffer because of no livelihood, and they will fall definitely under the poverty line. So this is a very precarious and sensitive situation. The point is, already federal government has given 12,000 rupees to the needy people, and they might give another 12,000 people who are unemployed. But this 12,000 is just, we have to understand one thing, is less than a 1 month pay. And already we are in the shutdown for the last 45 days. And, this will definitely not going to help them to feed, the basics, what they need. So the situation is not good. Plus, the government doesn't have any cushion at all. to give them more payouts in the days to follow. So the only solution is to ease down the lockdown or smart lockdown, or nothing else we have. We have no option literally.
Right, and he also said that 1 out of 4 Pakistanis have reduced food intake because of the pandemic. And this already, other than it being very sad and tragic as it is, but Pakistan already has a huge malnutrition problem, and there's a huge problem of stunting of growth in children and in our people as well. And this is just going to make it that much worse.
Yeah, obviously, if people don't have money, so how they will spend or how they will take food. I think the urban sector, urban cities, they are the worst hit at the moment, and people literally they don't have money for buying food, for their electricity bills, and for other emergencies as well. So people, already they are starving. And if you come to Karachi, we live in Karachi. If you go in the market, you can see a lot of people, they are asking for money on the streets. So this shows, a lot of people are unemployed and they have nothing to eat.
Right. We're also seeing this situation abroad. In the US, for example, millions of people losing their jobs and actually asking for food. Unfortunately, it's a worldwide situation. However, in Pakistan, the lockdown is supposed to wipe out over 1 million small businesses. The Economic Affairs Minister, Hamad Azhar, a few days ago said that they're going to give a relief to small businesses. They're going to pay their electricity bills from what the previous ones should have been, and things like that. What other measures can be taken to help small businesses?
I think the small businesses, electricity is not going to be the major relief for them. The problem is our markets are very informal, and they are not cash-based economy. Usually, if there is a shop, they usually sell it on credit. So the problem is, if everything is closed down, the entire credit cycle has been disturbed. And people are very worried whether they will be able to recover their credit, what they have given to the market as well. So the situation is, this electricity bill is not going to help them majorly, but yeah, definitely it will give them some relief. But on the other side, the other problem people are having is people have savings in gold and dollar, a very, very little saving. They have not been able to sell their gold even for the survival as well, because all jewelers are closed. If they have any dollars, all money exchange companies are closed as well. So people are very disturbed because they don't have any cash left with them to spend on food or on as well as on their living.
Right. Thank you, Muzammil Aslam, for joining us on our program. He's a senior economist, and as we're hearing that the devastating impact that the coronavirus epidemic and pandemic, and on top of that, the resulting lockdown, it's causing many loss of livelihoods in Pakistan, and the poorer communities, the daily wage workers are being affected the most. So in order to save lives, then we also have to weigh out, according to our Prime Minister and his advisors, we also have to weigh out the impact that it has on the common people, because this kind of loss of livelihood and poverty is also unacceptable. So how do we balance the two? That is the key, and that is what the government is trying to do going forward. That's all the time we have for our program today. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.